Hello, first-hand coders. Supposing we have a party and we want to program the door at the party to only allow those who are invited to pass. So, as we have learned previously, we can simply use an if statement. Now, supposing we want to separate the VIPs from the others. You guessed it, we use the if-else statement. However, the if-else statement will allow some of the uninvited guests to sneak in. What do? You guessed it again. We combine the if and the if-else statement by simply putting the if statement inside the if-else statement. Let's try our hands on an example. Let's say we are asked to calculate the period of an orbit using Kepler's law. We are given the equation. We can use this equation to find the radius. So the question here says, write a Python code to collect input T1, T, M, then use it to calculate R. The program must check T first. If it is negative, it returns an error message and end the program. If it is positive, then proceed to collect M input, check if it is negative. If it is negative, we send an error message, else we just calculate R. So we know that the first thing we need to do is to make our subject of the formula, which we have, which will look something like this right here. So the next thing is, let's write our code. Remember, the first thing we need to do is we should collect T. So we'll write T is equal to, so period will be float because a period can be a fraction. So enter the value of T. Okay, so we collect T from the user. Then the next thing is we have to check if T is negative time we don't want, so we print error message. Then in the else part of the code we write our next part of the program. So since if we are sure that T is not negative, then we go ahead and collect the value for M. So load. Now that we have the value of M, we are asked to check the value of M. So we have to add an if statement here, which will check if M is negative, then we give an error message. Mass cannot be negative, right? Okay, then if it is not negative, then we can go ahead and do the calculation. Remember, we are given G. G is given here, so we can use it. G is equal to 6.67408 exponential 10 to power minus 11. So then what do we have? R is equal to, okay, so we have T square times G times M. If you want to force the computer to do a certain calculation first, if in case you forgot the hierarchy, then you can use this technique. The next thing is, all this should be in the numerator. Divide by 4 pi 4 pi square, right? So we'll say, okay, divide by 4 times pi square. So since we want to use pi, we need to import it from math. So we'd say from math library import pi, so that we will be able to use the pi constant directly from the math library. So now we are done with the numerator and the denominator. The next thing is we want all of this to be cube root. So we'll just say, okay, to power of 1/3. This is a mistake because the computer would think you want to do a power of 1. So the best thing is we should put this in bracket, because order is higher than division, so it will just do a power of 1, and then all the solution divide by 3. So if you put it in bracket, you have avoided that. Finally, we just print our result. Print, okay, r equals to %.2f. We want to print r. So if we want to use the scientific notation, we can change this to e. So let's try with f. Okay, let's say we have an input 864,400.25, and we have 1053.32 as the mass. Okay, so oh sorry, 86400.25, 1053.32. Okay, if we change this to e, we will get the scientific notation instead. 86400.25, 1053.32. So you can see we are getting the scientific notation. What if we have a negative number? Let's run this with a negative number. So if we have minus 1000, if you run this, it will just come to this line. It will see this is negative, so it will just do this error message and then leave the experiment, the code. If you run, and let's say we have a positive value, but so now we are in the else part, since this is false. Now since we are in the else part, we are asked to input m. If m is negative, we'll get this error message and the program will leave the else condition, and then it will leave the outer else condition and the program ends. So what you should notice about this is that the things you should keep in mind is always remember the columns. Remember the columns to tell the computer you have finished the if statement and the else statement as well. Also, leave space for if you want to write something inside the if as well as inside the else. This if statement is inside this else part, but this program, this command print, is inside this if. So it has two spaces. The first space is because it is inside the else, and the second space is because it is inside the if. The same thing, however, for the else, it's just inside the if, the else part. So, but anything inside it will have double space. So because it's inside, first it's inside the else of the outer if statement, and then it's inside the else of the inner if statement. So you have to leave two spaces. Okay, so if you remember our our first animation, this will look something like this, right? So we have this giant if statement, and then inside this giant if statement we have another block of code in which we have another if statement right inside the block of code. So we have this if statement inside this nested if. Thank you for listening and see you next time.